Hi, I'm Marty Cohn, and welcome to episode 11 of Rotary Cares, a monthly show that tells you everything you need to know about Rotary. Rotary is a global network of 1.2 million friends, neighbors, leaders, and problem solvers that come together to make positive change in the world. Established over 110 years ago, Rotary now has over 35,000 clubs worldwide. Rotary's motto is service above self, and Rotarians adhere to a four-way test that's an ethical guide to how we lead our professional and our personal lives. The test itself has been translated into over 100 languages. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? In Brattleboro, we have two Rotary clubs. The Brattleboro Rotary Club meets every Thursday for lunch at the American Legion, and the Brattleboro Sunrise Rotary Club meets every Wednesday for breakfast at the American Legion. Today, we will be discussing one of the focus areas of Rotary International, Polio Plus. Our guest is Dave Countway, who's a director of the Alton Centennial Club in Alton, New Hampshire, and he's also a past assistant director of Rotary District 7870. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you for inviting me over, Marty. Glad to be here.
Well, thanks. All right, so before we talk about the polio, just so we get an understanding, how long have you been involved in Rotary?
I have been involved in Rotary since 2005. That was the Centennial year celebration for Rotary International. So our club was allowed to add the word Centennial after the name Alton. That gives us 13 going on 14 years now.
Terrific. And why did you join?
Well, it was a time in my life. I had retired as a teacher for 20 years, a school counselor for 16 years, and then I was also working in a career as a real estate sales agent. I had the time, I could be more flexible with my schedule, and when I was in the education field, my area of professional friendships was all teachers and counselors, that sort of a thing. What I found after exploring the opportunity to be part of a Rotary Club was the opportunity to meet people in my community from various professions who I always had hoped to get to know, and now I had an opportunity to socialize. And I think that's one of the strengths of Rotary, is that we're a collection of individuals with such varied backgrounds, and that's what makes successful Rotary projects, when you have a good exchange of ideas.
So speaking of Rotary projects, the eradication of polio, that's a major focus of Rotary International for 30 years. How did that focus evolve?
Well, I believe one of the early targets was it could be the country of Indonesia, where being kind of somewhat of an island nation, the opportunity was to try and eradicate polio from a country. At the time that this was being explored, 1,000 children a day worldwide were being inflicted with the polio virus. And the goal was to see if one country could be targeted for treatment with polio vaccine. The vaccines had been developed, much earlier, in the late 40s, early 50s. The highest number of cases in the United States was in the late 50s. We had 57,000 cases of polio in that one year. So targeting one country, it became a success. And I think it spurred Rotarians who had initiated this effort to say, why don't we tackle the world? There are only 10% of the countries in the world that are considered polio-free, 90% of the country's polio cases are occurring on a regular basis. So that was kind of the inspiration, the challenge, and the impossible task that Rotarians dreamed of taking on.
So looking back, over this period of time, this 30 years, how much money has Rotary contributed toward the eradication of polio?
The figure to date, when you add it all up, is over $2 billion. I think the figure is close to $2.2 billion. And that money has, come from all corners of the world. Individuals, even school children raising pennies, I suppose, could be part of that whole effort. But I think that one of the major first challenges that Rotary took on was a challenge to raise $200 million for that first initial attempt. And a lot of people thought, that will never be achieved. Well, Rotarians worldwide rose to the occasion, and I believe the figure was over $250 million was raised in the targeted period that was outlined. So gave everyone a good reality that the goal could be met. Take it off one country at a time.
It's fantastic in terms of what Rotary can do. Now, that they raise the money, but what are some of the activities that Rotary does? What do they do with the money?
Well, a lot of the money, again, goes towards ongoing research for ways to address, better ways of bringing the polio vaccine, and oral polio vaccines seem to be the best way to bring vaccine to the largest number of children in the world through what are still referred to as national immunization days in countries of the world that have taken this on. There's an expense for laboratories to treat samples. There's money being spent on the distribution of the vaccines themselves. When in some parts of the world, lady healthcare workers are employed for $2 a day to go out and give polio vaccine to 200 children, let's say, for example. Rotary helps to make sure that the vaccine is delivered in coolers, so that what's being delivered is going to be effective when it's given to children as a drop.
Now, in terms of those vaccines, how much does it actually cost for those vaccines?
Well, the vaccines themselves are very inexpensive. If you could actually kind of put a value on it, it may be $3.
$3.
Exactly. And so the big cost is the distribution and delivery. So you have to have coordinators in a country, so that if there are 3 days of national immunization for all the children under age 5, you've got to make sure that there are people in place that are going to supervise and oversee and make sure that as many children as possible are reached. So there's an advertising part to announcing when there's going to be an immunization day. So posters are distributed on street corners in a big city, or in many different advertising formats, so that families will bring their children under age 5 to these little pop-up tents or whatever it might be for getting the polio vaccine.
Incredible what the logistics that go into that.
Exactly.
And so when we're looking at the 30 years that Rotary's been doing this, how many children do you think have been immunized against polio with Rotary's help?
Well, I believe the best statistic is look at what happened in 2017. There were over 430 million children who received polio vaccine, and I think it was 22 countries with 2 billion doses of polio vaccine. So if you could keep a number on how many children had received, you have to estimate it's a number in the millions. I think the more important part is that there are 17 million children, over 17 million children today, walking around polio-free, who, had this effort not to eradicate polio not been undertaken over 30 years ago, there would be 17 million children with you know, paralysis that could leave them crippled and could leave them dependent on being carried around by, if it's a young child, a parent can deal with that, but as they grow into adulthood, their only option is perhaps to have the access to a wheelchair. In many parts of the world, wheelchairs are still in great demand. There are 25 million people right now in the world that could benefit from wheelchairs. When you see somebody who is afflicted with polio in a third world country, crawling, it makes you realize that that's probably their only option, and the quality of life is impacted severely.
So let's put this in perspective. Right now, what's the number of polio cases in the world?
Well, in the past year, I think at the latest number is 22 cases, which is outstanding. We're looking at 3 countries in particular: Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nigeria. And to see the numbers that low, knowing that 430 million children received polio virus, it makes you realize that a large part of the population under age 5 is being reached that are potentially have not developed the immunity to resist the polio virus.
Again, worth repeating, there's only 3 countries and there are 17 cases left. Incredible work in 30 years.
Exactly.
October 24th is World Polio Day. We're going to take a short break for this word from endpolionow.org to learn about what's happening, how we're this close, and how we can eradicate polio. We'll be right back.
We are this close.
We are this close.
We are this close.
This close to making history.
This close.
We're this close, this close.
We are this close.
We are this close.
This close.
This close to changing the world.
We are this close to making sure no child suffers a crippling disease
Ever again.
We are this close to making history.
We are this close to ending polio.
We're this close to ending polio.
We're this close.
This close.
This close to ending polio.
This close.
We are this close to ending polio. All we need is you.
All we need is you.
All we need is you. Is you.
All we need is you.
This close.
If we don't act now, we may lose this chance forever. Help Rotary make history at endpolio.org.
Welcome back to Rotary Cares, a monthly show that answers every question you could possibly have about Rotary International. Our guest is Dave Countway, and we're talking about eradicating polio, which would be the second disease in the world that's going to be wiped out after smallpox. Dave, back in 2012, you and your wife made a special trip to Pakistan on behalf of Rotary, End Polio Now. And tell us about that trip.
Well, my wife and I were invited by Shahzad Ahmad, the district governor in Pakistan. Pakistan is divided into 2 Rotary districts. The northern section of Rotary has 80 Rotary clubs. And of those 80 clubs, 3 or 4 of those clubs are actually in Afghanistan. And I think as a new Rotary member starting in 2005, I had heard about people risking their lives, the possibility of getting shot at just to get to a Rotary Club meeting.
Wow.
And here I was meeting Shahzad, who was visiting with a group study exchange, who visited the Rotary clubs in southern Vermont and southern New Hampshire in 2010, I believe it was. Shahzad said, please come help us with our immunization of children. My wife and I thought this would be an opportunity that we would want to participate in. I had served as a youth exchange officer for my club and had managed the visiting of, a year-long exchange of students from Belgium, from Chile, from Japan. So I thought, these kids, young kids, teenagers, have such courage to come and leave their families and come to participate in a youth study exchange. I think part of my inspiration was, if those kids have courage, I think I could have courage to go to another corner of the world. My children, Peter and Melissa, both thought we were very foolish to be going to Pakistan, because Pakistan had an image of being a dangerous place to travel to. And we thought we were going to be going with a group of 8. As it turned out, other folks that were in that planned trip backed out for various personal reasons. But Sylvia and I persisted, and we went through the process of passports and getting the shots that we needed. And we were hosted by 3 Rotary families for our 12-day visit to Pakistan. The first 3 days were spent giving polio oral vaccine to children in polio, Rotary camps or polio camps in the city of Lahore. The first day in Lahore, we actually had 3 armed guards, because we were going into an alleyway where if you knocked on a door, you weren't sure who might be behind the door. Mm-hmm. We never felt any threat or anything. And the second day out, we were with a different Rotary club that had set up a pop-up tent, and 200 children brought by their families, brothers, and sometimes it would be an 8-year-old carrying his 3-year-old, sister, right, to come and get their polio vaccine. So the experience of looking into the eyes of these young children, giving a drop of polio vaccine, knowing that you might be, affecting the future of that child, was very, very, memorable, and I think it was a life-changing experience for my wife Sylvia and I both.
It's just fantastic. You took 12 days of your life, but you've saved millions of kids. No, I'm not. It's when you think about the multiplying effect.
The multiplying effect is huge. Yes,
it's just incredible. It really shows you the power of one, or in the case of you and your wife, what we could do to affect change. So that was 6 years ago, and what have you been doing? You said it was a life-changing event and it had a tremendous impact. What have you been doing for the last 6 years in terms of helping to end polio?
Sure. Well, I think in the coming back to, we actually started in 2010 after going to a Rotary International conference in Montreal, Canada, and learning about a club in Kansas that, to raise awareness and to raise funds for polio eradication, had actually found by selling sunflower seeds, they could make a connection with folks in their community, bring the story about polio, to let people know that there are still corners of the world where polio was very active and there were high rates of polio infection. So by just bringing awareness to the small community of Alton, New Hampshire, whenever there was town voting, we would have a table set up with a sunflower seed exhibit. People might pick up a package of sunflower seeds. It says 60 cents can save a life. Somebody might give $1 for a pack and plant those flowers. The high school actually planted some sunflowers that they had started as seeds one spring when the high school students came back in the fall. There were these beautiful big tall sunflowers outside the entrance to the school.
Wow.
I always remember that, but I think it carried the story of the fact that polio virus was still active in certain corners of the world, and the eradication effort that Rotary had started. There was an end sight in mind, and we're certainly this close to it at this point.
It's really incredible, and I love, it's really a simple idea, but 60 cents can save a life. I mean,
That's right.
It's fantastic that you're doing that. But Rotary, this is a focus area of Rotary. Rotary has done a lot, but Rotary isn't the only organization
That's true.
doing it.
Right.
What are some of the other organizations that are involved, and what are they doing?
Well, the World Health Care Organization is a major partner. The Center for Disease Control is a major partner. UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, is a major partner. And of course the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a major partner. So the end goal of bringing a final eradication of polio, it cannot happen exclusively just through Rotarians' efforts. Rotarians will always get the recognition of, for all the funds raised to eradicate polio, Rotary has raised 14% of that $8 billion, or how many $billion it has taken. And as a private organization, Rotary has been, I think, one of the largest contributors, with over 40% of the funds by a private organization raised. Right now, ongoing fundraising that Rotarians raise is matched on a 2-to-1 basis by the Gates Foundation. So if a Rotary Club raises $3,000, that $3,000 becomes $9,000 towards the final push to end polio.
Well, again, it's fantastic that the Gates, have recognized this and recognized Rotary with their generosity. Are there other people that you know about that are raising funds?
Well, I know that in 2013, this is just kind of a historical fact, there was actually a vaccine summit held in Abu Dhabi, and there were representatives from countries of the world, the major industrial countries of the world, as well as private individuals, as well as members from the Gates Foundation. The goal in 2013 was to target 5 years later as a possible end of this whole polio campaign. Now that we're down to 22 or 17 cases in the year 2018, we're getting awfully close. But the goal of that summit was to get pledges of $5.5 billion. At the end of that summit, the pledges totaled up to $4.5 billion. And the point that I've told to other Rotary clubs or to other groups that I've made a presentation to is that the United States government made a pledge of $210 million each year for a 5-year period. So we can be very proud of the United States government's being a partner in this whole goal, because $210 million times 5 adds up to over $1 billion. And the Gates Foundation themselves pledged $1.8 billion of the $4.5 billion that was achieved at that summit. And we know since then, other countries in the G8, it's an agenda item when they get together to make sure that there's funding for polio eradication. If we stopped now, as you know, if we stopped in 10 years, we would be back having 200,000 cases of polio a year. So there's no turning back.
Well, and I think that's a really good point. A lot of people go, well, we're this close, and and only 17 cases, what difference does it make? But in this modern world, someone gets on an airplane.
That's right.
Before you know it, we're back to another polio epidemic.
And we've had examples of that even in the past year where polio cases have, popped up. And when that does occur, there's, again, those that work in the laboratories can almost trace the genetic structure of the polio virus in terms of where did it originate, because these polio viruses, I guess, take on a marker that can, and there's a mop-up effort that goes on again. So the funds that Rotary is raising at this time are still going to help make sure that the eradication does reach a conclusion.
All right, so here's my last question, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. All right, for you, what's the best thing about being a Rotarian?
Well, I think that the fact that you are welcomed when you are visiting with other Rotarians. When Sylvia and I were in Pakistan for 12 days, we were with 3 different Rotary families. After 3 days of polio, giving polio immunization drops, the rest of our time was visiting schools, hospitals, clinics, and orphanages supported by Rotary clubs in Pakistan. And everywhere we went, we were treated like long-lost family who had just kind of showed up because they knew that we were in sympathy with the projects and efforts that they were working on. In the winter, my wife and I have started taking a vacation, and in Florida, I attend Rotary meetings with the Sanibel Captiva Rotary Club. When I'm attending a breakfast meeting on a Friday morning there, I'm again welcomed, and I think it's the friendship that Rotarians extend to each other, because we know that our bigger goal is serving humanity, and there's not, the world problems can be addressed by one person, but when they're multiplied by a whole 1.2 million Rotarians who are addressing many, many problems in many corners of the world, we really are making a difference as an organization.
Well, Dave, again, I want to thank you for being on the show, and I also want to thank you for all that you're doing. It's just fantastic. October 24th is World Polio Day. Go to endpolio.org to learn how you can help eradicate polio, wipe it off of the planet. I'd like to shout out to Sunrise Rotarian Kevin Yeager, who's doing all the magic behind the camera. I'd like to thank BCTV and especially Brian Bashaw for helping us bring this show to you. If you have any questions, concerns, or ideas for future topics, send them to info@brattleboro-rotaryclub.org, info@brattleboro-rotaryclub.org. I'm Marty Cohn. Thanks for watching.